तू चलता चल, तू चलता चल, तू चलता चल.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a very special guest with us, and an interaction with him would certainly fill us with zeal and enthusiasm and help us to achieve our goals for which we all are here. It is a privilege to have Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani with us. Before starting the session, I would like to give a brief about the Air Officer. He is a qualified flying instructor, an instrument rating instructor, and an examiner commissioned into Indian Air Force in December 1982. He is fully ops on erstwhile Ajit and Jaguar aircrafts, trains and commanded 1st Harvey Squadron of Indian Air Force, commanded Air Defense Direction Center and an operational base. He is one of the few to have served in the senior ranks in both the joint service commands, Andaman and Nicobar Command as Air Force Component Commander, and in Strategic Forces commanded as Chief Staff Officer. The other joint service appointments include Air Officer Commanding Maritime Air Operations in Mumbai and Chief Instructor at Defence Service Staff College, Wellington. He has done the Staff Course, Higher Air Command course, and a year's course at Royal College of Defence Studies, London. He was superannuated from the service in November 2019, presently working as Additional Director General at Center for Air Power Studies in New Delhi. He likes to play golf, read, and write on issues concerning the nation. Now I request the Air Officer to take over.
Thank you, Petri, and I would like to thank Colonel Nehru for giving me this opportunity to interact with you all. And I have always believed that, when I interact with young people, youngsters, it is I who learn from you all rather than the other way around. And I would like this to be more of an interactive process. But to begin with, I will just cover a little bit about Air Force and air power and where do we stand in the national scheme of things. And then, Maitri, I think you can take on for the Q&A, whichever way you want to moderate it, and I'll answer whatever is there. Now, I think for you all, it is very important to understand that any nation, when it expresses or shows its power in the international world or forum, we take all components of power in it, which becomes a model of a comprehensive national power. Now, the comprehensive national power has got, your culture, economy, geography, history, and various other components, education, literacy, everything goes into the comprehensive national power of a nation. And one of these components of the comprehensive national power is military power. So when you talk of military power, the military power encompasses land, maritime, and the aerospace power. I mean the air power, which is now goes into the space domain, aerospace power. So where does the aerospace power fit into this whole scheme of things? A very easy way to explain this is, when you talk of ends, ways, and means. Now, when you talk of ends, ways, and means, what do you mean by ends? Ends is what is the national objective? What does the nation, where does it want to see itself? What does it want to achieve? And where does it want to be? And then it employs all the means that are there at its disposal. Amongst them, one of the means is air power. And in air power, the mean of implementing this are the aircraft, which include all the aircraft, contrary to what you would like to understand or believe. It also includes military aircraft, civil aircraft, everything that flies in the air, and of course now the satellite and the space domain as well. So this is where the aerospace or the air power comes into being. Now, any conflict or war that you fight, I think the primacy of air power or aerospace power is very important to understand, because if you win the war in the air, then there is no way that you can lose the war on the ground or on the surface. I mean, whether it is air, on sea or on land. And if you lose the war in the air, then you have lost it totally and comprehensively. As far as Indian Air Force is concerned, I think we are facing many challenges today because of the depleted assets on which I can talk in the Q&A session. The number of fighter squadrons has reduced drastically, and we are also grappling with this change that the nation wants to implement in terms of the theatre and other commands. And what you need to understand is that amongst the other all the services, Air Force is the one which is most sensitive to technology, and this problem has got compounded with the unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, and the cyber and the space linkages. The other thing about Air Force I would like to mention is that the air assets can operate across all domains, whether it is tactical or strategic. That means, because of its reach, capability, and precision, and the speed at which they can be employed or deployed, they can operate across the spectrum, unlike the other two services, that is the Army and the Navy. And the last bit is about the Air Force coming to the aid of the nation in all natural calamities and disaster relief. You've seen in the COVID crisis the transportation of vaccines across the country during demonetization when currency was transported, as also during elections and all. It is always there at the service of the nation. And with these few words, I think I'm ready to take on Maitri, whichever way you want to ask questions or conduct the Q&A.
Yes, sir. Sir, as Indian Air Force has recently completed 88 years of glory and stating its motto, Nabham Sparsham Diptam, that is, touch the sky with glory, Indian Air Force has evolved in the course of time in terms of manpower and technology. Today, Indian Air Force possesses cutting-edge technology. And given that, sir, what are the future prospects of advanced medium combat aircrafts and fifth generation fighter aircrafts?
Okay, you're very right in saying that, like I said, Air Force is very technology intensive. The first thing that I would like to cover is the LCA, that is a light combat aircraft, which is the Tejas, for which the government has just placed an order for 83 aircraft costing 48,000 crores. Now, the Indian Air Force, Tejas is incidentally an indigenously developed aircraft, the concept of which started in 1983, and the first flight took place in the early part of this century, 2002-3. So, the government placed an order for 40 Tejas aircraft in the IOC, that is the initial operation clearance, and FOC, that is the final operation clearance. So the second lot of 20 aircraft is in the process of being inducted in the second squadron of the Air Force. And the LCA Mark 1A, for which the order has been placed, 83 aircraft, these are going to be powered by the General Electric 404 engines. And this is for which they've already signed a deal with General Electric for some $700 million. Now, the problem that has plagued us is, as far as the indigenous aircraft industry is concerned, one was lack of orders, which now, of course, has been fulfilled. And second is the capacity to build aeroplanes. This order of 83 aircraft is likely to be completed only by 2028-2029. As far as the AMCA is concerned, which is the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, the initial design for this started sometime in 2009, and the difference between the LCA Tejas and the AMCA is going to be, Tejas is a single engine aircraft, whereas AMCA is going to be a twin engine aircraft. Now, this is going to be 4.5 to 5th generation. Now, when I talk of 4.5 to 5th generation, you have to understand what does that signify. It signifies an internal weapons bay. It signifies stealth technology. It signifies, especially for the AMCA, the design, what we have done is a supersonic intake design, which is the first of its kind in the world that the India is attempting to build. And this aircraft is going to be a 25-ton class aircraft, unlike the Tejas, which is a 14, 15-ton class aircraft. The good news is that the preliminary design of the AMCA has already been completed. The first aircraft is expected to fly by 2024-25, and the production of this AMCA is likely to begin by 2031-2032 onwards. Now, HAL has already set up the assembly line for the 83 aircraft of the Tejas, which is going to start producing 16 aircraft from 2025 onwards. And this is what is going to come in handy for the AMCA design as well. The AMCA will be in two configurations, that is the stealth as well as the non-stealth configuration, and it will be developed in two phases, that is the AMCA Mark 1, which will be powered by a foreign engine, that is the GE 414 engine, and AMCA Mark 2 is going to be powered by an indigenous engine, for which talks are still on for a collaboration to develop this indigenously. We are lacking in engine technology. As far as India is concerned, we have not been able to develop an engine for the LCA Tejas also. The Kaveri engine, because of its weight, could not be used. And what is proposed is that the development, manufacturing and production of the AMCA is going to be through a special purpose vehicle like the ADA, that is the Aeronautical Defense Agency, which was conceived for the purpose of the Tejas. And there is also a talk of developing a twin-engine deck-based fighter for our indigenous aircraft carrier, which is the Vikrant, which is already undergoing sea trials. So that is as far as the AMCA is concerned.
So that was really informative. And moving further, sir, coming to the squadrons of Indian Air Force, how present-day squadrons of Indian Air Force are keeping up with the upcoming technology and countering the two-front war which it is facing because of Pakistan and China at the same time?
Okay, as far as technology is concerned, I think all of you need to understand is that while it is easy for an aircraft to adapt to change in technology by upgrading its avionics, that is the radars and the early warning and electronic warfare systems, as also the weapons that are deployed on the aircraft in terms of precision and all that. So while we have old aircraft, that is the MiG-21, the Jaguars and the MiG-29s, but if you see, most of the Indian Air Force aircraft have undergone major upgrades. So that is how we keep up pace with technology, by undertaking upgrades on the aircraft. The Sukhoi 30 is also going in for a major upgrade. The other way of keeping up with this technology is that you have teams of aircraft, that is when they fly in the air. So you will have a Mirage 2000 flying with a MiG-21 as a buddy. That means the radar of the Mirage 2000 will be used, and the MiG-21 is going to be operating along with that aircraft as a team, taking advantage of the technology of the aircraft, which is superior in technology. Also, we have got a networking system where all the aircraft are networked through a integrated airborne command and control system through the AWACS, and that is how we find that the aircraft which are old adapt to technology. As far as the airframe is concerned, engine is concerned, unfortunately you cannot do much because that stays. So that is how the aircraft adapt to technology. As far as the threat from, you talked of the threat from both Pakistan as well as China. We have depleted assets. The number of fighter squadrons are less. But I think the arrival of the Rafale in the Indian Air Force has truly been a game changer. We have also inducted helicopters, that is the attack helicopters, Apache helicopters. And by this year end, we will also have the advanced S-400 air defense system, which we are inducting from Russia. So that is how we have kept pace with technology as well as dealing with the twin threats of Pakistan and China.
Sir, as you have mentioned that there are aircrafts, for example, Su-30, which is going for upgradation soon. Sir, but thinking about that, sir, MiG-21 Bison, which is still being used by the Indian Air Force. Sir, in spite of witnessing so many accidents because of MiG-21, sir, so what are the reasons that it is still being used, MiG-21 Bison?
Okay, I think firstly I need to, this popular perception in the nation or the country that the MiG-21 has too many accidents and the MiG-21 is a flying coffin. I would like to dispel that because you see vintage cars, you have vintage car rallies as well. Now, how do these vintage cars fly? They fly because they are maintained, and they are maintained with a lot of money and resources and the skill of the people who are looking after these cars. Similarly, no aircraft gets airborne or takes to the skies unless it is certified fit in all respects. So, yes, technology is old. Yes, it is an old aeroplane, but it will only take to the skies only if it is fully fit and worthy. There is a plan to phase out. All aircraft have a total technical life and a total airframe life. So in the next 4 years, 3 to 4 years or so, you will find that the MiG-21s will be entirely phased out from the Indian Air Force. The reason why this has not happened so far is that if you see the Tejas program, the way it was envisaged, actually by now the entire MiG-21 fleet should have been replaced by the Tejas or the LCA. Because of delays, which I don't want to go into, for whatever reasons, these aircraft could not be phased out. We unfortunately had to extend the lives of the MiG-21s because you need weapons, platforms and aircraft systems to fight your adversaries. So that's...
Sir, as we are talking about technology, sir, what is the agenda of Indian Air Force to counter cross-border UAVs and low-flying drones?
Okay, so talking about the UAVs, these have been game changers in the recent past. Traditionally, your air defense systems, which were there around across the world, catered for large aircraft, fighter class, fast moving, and slow moving aircraft with advanced in technology of Doppler radars and all. You could also tackle slow moving aircraft. But the moment these became very small with low noise, then you found that you could not detect UAVs and drones because in the recent past, you've seen in Saudi Arabia, there have been attacks on the ships and all and the American platforms, as well as in Russia, they've been able to penetrate. Now, because of the small size, the low radar cross section of these aircraft and the use of carbon composites and plastics and electric motors, you find that these objects have been difficult to detect, which is what happened at Jammu Air Base also. Now, how do I detect an aircraft which is this small and all that? So the technology that I need to use is radars, which are short range, with electro-optical and infrared, radars, as well as passive radio frequency detectors. So these are the methods or means by which I need to detect these low-flying and small-flying objects. Now, also you need to understand is that I cannot have a system like this across the entire country because it is cost intensive. Unlike radars which look at high levels and big aircraft, today you will find that the entire Indian airspace, almost 80 to 90%, is covered by radars. But to cover this entire airspace for a threat against UAVs and small flying objects is near impossible. So what is the option that I have? The option that I have is to devise systems which are already available, which will protect your vital areas and vital assets and vital points like Delhi or important air bases or military installations. How do I protect them? I protect them by two options. One is by a soft kill and one is by a hard kill. So when I say soft kill, what it encompasses is the jamming of the radio frequency on which the system is operating, the jamming of the global navigation support system, that is the GPS on which it is operating and coming to the targets, and also spoofing. By spoofing, what I mean is giving false signals to lure that away from where it is intended to go. And then you have hard kill options. In hard kill options, I can kill that by lasers, I can kill that by high powered microwave energy, and I can also kill it by guns, which can be either automated or autonomously operated when they detect something like this. We also have a concept of net guns. That means you throw a net around the aircraft which entangles the propellers of the UAV, thereby making it crash or bringing it down on the ground. Also, we can have low cost defender drones. That means I have a drone which is loitering in the air over these areas, and or slow moving trainer aircraft or a helicopter. This kind of a concept can be done over specific areas for specific periods of time, because it is not possible to do it continuously 24/7. So that is the technology that the nation is intending to use. We have gone in for a collaboration with Bell, and some of these systems, the order has already been placed and it is going to be implemented very shortly to protect us from these drones attacks.
Yes, sir. Sir, then moving forward, sir, as you have served in the senior ranks in joint commands, namely Andaman and Nicobar, and you have seen things closely. And in today's scenario, there have been so many speculations about theatre command. Sir, so what are your views about the upcoming theatre commands, and what are the challenges?
Okay, there is a lot of debate which is going on, and I have written about it also extensively. And I can share the link of my articles, or I'd request Nehru to share the link of 2-3 articles I've written on theatre commands. What I believe in is that it is incorrect to adapt or ape a system which is prevalent in the West. That is point number one. If you look at America, United States is actually like a global policeman, and they fight expeditionary wars. That means all their wars that are fought outside of their own homeland or mainland. So it is important for a nation like that to have commands which are geographically placed across the globe, not only of the country. And that is why they have these theatre commands. India is wanting to copy that system. We have a reason against that. The second thing is that India plans to name these theatres as maritime or land theatres. When you name a theatre as maritime or land, that means you are going to have a commander of a land or a maritime over that theatre, and which is incorrect. In my opinion, no service, whether it is the Army, the Navy or the Air Force, can fight or win a battle on its own. We have to fight the war together. We have to fight it jointly, and only then we will be able to win the war. How do I fight a war jointly? Unless I plan jointly, unless we sit together, decide which is the best way to fight this war, I will not be able to implement it. The problem with what the nation is trying to do is to make structures and then hope like hell that things will fall into place. Unfortunately, that is not how the things will work. What Air Force is against is that you cannot call any theatre land or maritime. It has to be either the Northern Theatre or the Western Theatre or the maritime, the peninsular theatre, looking at it like that. Secondly, the commands of these theatres must be rotational. That means Army, Air Force, and Navy commanders should be there. It cannot be land centric or it cannot be Navy centric. And the third reason is that the air power, by its very nature, is indivisible. That means if I have an aeroplane which can perform many roles, it can do reconnaissance, it can do air defense, it can do ground attack, it can do surveillance, it can do targeting, and I have only so much. I think the whole nation is aware that there are only 30 squadrons. Now, if I divide these 30 squadrons into 3 or 4 theaters, then the tenet of air power which is there, which is indivisibility of assets, and it has to be controlled by a central commander who understands the application of the air power and the nuances of application of air power. Only then you will be able to achieve results. Otherwise, you will not be able to do it. So that is the Air Force's thinking. While we are not against theatre commands, what we are against is dividing the air power assets into penny packets, and also the theatres which are being named as land, maritime. That is not the nomenclature which should be given.
So that was definitely helpful, as there are many people who still have confusion about theatre commands, and getting first-hand information from you will be definitely helpful for us. So now shifting our discussion towards changing geopolitics. There have been escalating tensions along LAC, be it at Galwan, Hot Springs, or Taiwan in Arunachal Pradesh. Sir, how Indian Air Force has been playing a proactive role along LAC during all these times, and how Indian Air Force is considered to have an upper hand over PLA Air Force?
When this Galwan crisis took place, the Air Force responded very rapidly by helping the army deploy across eastern Ladakh. The fighter squadrons got deployed at Leh and Srinagar and those areas. And the helicopters, the Chinook helicopters, also helped in places where the fixed wing aircraft could not reach, that is going to the intervalleys, and deploying material, men, troops, and everything. So this crisis showed that the Indian Air Force was ready to respond to any crisis which happened, and it happened almost overnight, and we were there when the nation needed us. The other respect in which we are probably better placed than China is that all the Chinese airfields, that is Gargunsa, Hoping, and one more which are there in the Tibet region, all these airfields are at an altitude of 14,000 feet. Now, higher an airfield, lower is the density over there, and therefore the payload, that means the weapons and the fuel that aircraft can carry, gets reduced drastically. So China is at a disadvantage because they cannot get airborne from there with a higher payload, and they have restrictions over there. Whereas if you look on the Indian side, we are closer to the border and we have airfields which are at much lower altitudes, and which means that we can get deployed with full payload of weapons and fuel and everything. The second thing I feel where we are probably better off is that if you look at the Indian Air Force, the wars that it has fought and the international exercises that it does with like-minded countries, whether it is UAE or USA, France, Singapore, I think we have a lot of multilateral exercises in which we learn a lot. And if you look at China, China is very insular in its approach, and they have not had any conflict post-Vietnam. So China, in that respect, is at a slight bit of a disadvantage, and we hope to keep up this advantage as far as China is concerned.
So from the discussion, it is very evident that India is at two-front war with China and Pakistan. And given that the nemesis of Afghan government can become another challenge for India, as there are speculations over emerging closeness among the three. So, sir, how Indian armed forces, to be specific, ever ready to face any repercussions?
Okay, in my opinion, a two-front war, while it is true that we are faced with two hostile neighbors, that is Pakistan as well as China, it is extremely unlikely that in the event of a conflict with one, the other nation will come with active participation. We witnessed that in whether it was Balakot or whether it was Kargil, the closeness between China and Pakistan goes back to the 60s, but China at no stage even expressed its willingness to join in the conflict or actively participate. So that scenario probably is unlikely. And when you talk of Afghanistan, yes, China has offered to help the Taliban regime, and I think the first lot of aid has already reached there. The reason why China is doing that is because its BRI, that is the Belt and Road Initiative or the corridor, which is going through that region, that is the Wakhan corridor up to Gwadar. So it is more worried about that than anything else. Unless no nation in the world has recognized the Taliban government. Even though China wants to give aid to the Taliban, but recognition of Taliban, if China does at this stage, China itself will become a pariah in the eyes of the world, and it is probably conscious of this fact. So a collusion between Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, Pakistan, China, I understand they may help them economically, may help them materially in terms of weapons, but active participation, I have my doubts whether it will happen. And Taliban, of course, at the end of the day, I think economy is what is going to ruin the country. You can already see that bomb blasts have taken place. I think yesterday, day before, in a Shia mosque where some 50-60 people have died. The attention of the world is already shifting away from Afghanistan, and nobody is talking about it as much as they did, like in the middle of August when the US quietly withdrew from Afghanistan. So that is the ground reality.
Sir, definitely. And sir, Taliban considers itself as a patron of Islam. And in spite of all the promises made to China, will Xinjiang region not become a challenge for the Islamic ideology which Taliban possesses?
Taliban wants to run the nation as per the Sharia, and a lot of people expected that Taliban 2.0 is going to be different from the Taliban that existed in the 90s or the early 2000s, which unfortunately is not true, because I don't think the ideology of Taliban is ever going to change, because women already are, they've been removed from the workplaces, universities, schools, colleges and everywhere. As far as the Xinjiang region is concerned, China has suppressed this with an iron hand. The demography of that place has been changed in totality. So it is unlikely that the spillover of Taliban will, go into Xinjiang. Because if you look at Pakistan also, they keep talking of persecution of minorities in J&K, and they keep raking up this issue at the United Nations and any forum that they get, whether it was SARC, which has come to an end as of today. But at no stage did they talk of the persecution of Muslims in Xinjiang, because it was in their economic interest to continue to be with China. Similarly, if China is giving aid to the Taliban and the Taliban government is in power, it is highly unlikely that this spillover will take place into the Xinjiang region.
Yes, sir. Sir, since we are talking about Afghanistan, And one of the question which crops up is that, sir, what was the role of Afghan Air Force during 20 years of war? How it shaped the narrative of war against Taliban, and what led to its nemesis after USA left?
Okay, I think this what the Americans did was they helped build the Afghan National Security National Security and Defense Force ANSDF. They trained these people, they gave them jobs, and the Afghan Air Force, in limited extent, that was used with the help of the Americans for targeting and everything, and they were protected by the Americans. Now, I will give you an example. When the Americans quietly left that place, uh, you know, it is not that the Afghan National Security and Defense Force did not want to fight. They wanted to fight, but to give an example, the Afghan chap who's a junior commissioned officer or a sergeant or whatever is sitting at a post, looking for Taliban people or insurgency or anything, and he gets killed by the Taliban people. So just see the effect that it has on the morale of the rest of the Afghan people who are part of that Afghan National Security and Defense Force. That is point number one. The second point is the Afghan leadership itself deserted the country. So when you don't have a strong political leader who's keeping the country united, it is unlikely that the armed forces of that country will remain united. Because this fighter who's there in the Afghan National Security and Defense Force is worried about his life, about his family, and he will immediately revert to the clan or the local ideology of the Taliban group or whichever group which is operating over there. As you understand, Afghanistan is a tribal region. So overnight, their loyalties switched from being to that of a combined Afghan National Security Defense Force to the tribal or the clan loyalty, and that is why it just dissipated. There was a lot of, people were expecting that it's a 3 lakh strong force, AFNDF, ANSDF. They will not collapse like that, but it collapsed because there was no will to fight. The morale just, soared through, went down drastically, and that was the end of it. Because then desertions came in large numbers, and that was the end of any resistance that was there to the Taliban. And I suppose the ISI also has a large hand to play in this whole scheme of things.
So that was a really informative discussion. And sir, now as we are confined by the time, I would request the students to come up with their questions one by one.
So I would like to ask you that at present, what would be the extent of private participation in improving the operational capabilities of the Air Force, and what's the future ahead?
Okay, as far as the indigenous defense industry is concerned, there are a lot of steps that the government has taken to encourage them to participate. Any contract which is less than 2,000 crores of spares, components and all will have to be fulfilled by the indigenous defense industry. We've already had a contract signed with Tata Advanced Systems Limited for manufacturing the C-295 aircraft, which is the first time in our country a civil, that means outside the PSU, is going to manufacture transport aircraft in India. Apart from this, BEL, that is Bharat Electronics Limited, BDL, and L&T, as well as the Kalyani Group, they are all doing a lot of work to indigenize the defense industry. If you've seen the news, the latest MR SAM that was supplied to us was done by the Kalyani Group, And so there are efforts underway, but all this will take some time before the defense industry matures to a level where we can actually start exporting also in a big way apart from meeting our own requirements.
Good morning, sir. This is Push Jain, sir.
Yeah.
Firstly, it's an honor to talk to you, sir. So, my question is that, sir, what is the role of artificial intelligence in Indian Air Force? Like, how does it supports Indian Air Force?
AI in terms of manned unmanned aircraft and detecting intruders into the sky, that means your radar systems and all. So there are a lot of ways and means in which AI is today playing a role, and its role is only likely to increase in the coming future.
Got it, sir. Thank you so much for the answer.
Yeah, not at all.
Sir, my question to you is how Indian Air Force or the defense forces in the eastern sector is prepared to counter China's aggression into the eastern sector of our country?
Yeah, Rituraj, I think I already answered that earlier when I said that we are deployed across the eastern sector. That means the army is already deployed, and I think yesterday only the army chief has made a statement that we will not budge an inch unless China moves back. As far as Indian Air Force is concerned, our fighter aircraft are on readiness 24/7 to counter any aggression by the Chinese in this region. Plus also, we are keeping a very close eye on the developments across the border. That means the flying that the Chinese, the PLAF, that is the Chinese Air Force is undertaking in that area, region and sector, and the kind of exercises that they are doing. So we are totally aware of what is happening across, and we are prepared to counter any aggressive tactics that they may undertake at extremely short notices on time. So,
Sir, I have few questions. The first one is why India doesn't use strategic bombers. So, for example, USA use B-52, B-1, B-2, B-21. China uses H-6. Russia uses Tu-160. Why does India doesn't use one?
In the earlier times, when aircraft aviation came into being, you had aircraft manufactured for specific purposes. That means an aircraft which was supposed to fight another aircraft in the air was an air defense aircraft. An aircraft which was supposed to take photographs like the SR-71 Blackbird was only doing this role. An aircraft which was supposed to go across long distances and drop weapons like a bomber, B-52 you talk of, was doing only that. So in our case, in the Indian situation, we had the Canberra, which was a strategic bomber. As technology advanced and as the cost became a factor, you found that the aircraft that started getting manufactured were multi-role. That means today a Rafale can act as an air defense fighter, it can act as a ground attack aircraft, it can act as a recce aircraft, and it can also act as a strategic bomber. So today the Jaguar can be a strategic bomber if you want to take the Jaguar and drop weapons anywhere, and so can a Rafale or a Su-30. So that is the answer to your question.
Sir, one more question.
Yeah.
What will be the definition of sixth generation fighter? So, for example, the first generation was jet engine, the second was supersonic, the third was radar, the fourth was electronic warfare, the fifth was stealth. So, what will be the sixth generation? The AI?
See, presently there is no sixth generation aircraft which is flying in the world. So the F-22 Raptor or the F-35, they are fifth generation technology. And as technology advances and increases, probably AI or unmanned aircraft with all these capabilities and roles will be the sixth generation. So there is still work going on, research going on, but sixth generation technology, we don't see anything happening in the near future.
So, with the recent departure of USA from Afghanistan and the trail of chaos that followed, a narrative had surfaced soon after the incidents that US spoils whatever it touches and wherever it enters. For example, Syria, Iraq, Libya, now Afghanistan. What's your opinion on this, sir?
Again, I have written an article on this. I'll share on this the soft power paradox. I think probably Nehru has read this article. Maybe you can share with your students. See, America, wherever it has intervened militarily, it has burnt not only its fingers but also of the region, which has continued to be in turmoil ever since, barring a few cases like Korea, South Korea, So you can, I find that the Americans, unless you are culturally, ethnically, and regionally into that society and you understand the problems, you will not be able to find solutions. So there is truth in what you're saying. Americans came into Afghanistan with an objective of war against terror, but you cannot wage a global war against terror. They wiped out Osama bin Laden. In my opinion, they should have left at that time itself. And when it became difficult for them to continue to sustain because of domestic opinion, they just decided to withdraw. And the result is for everyone to see.
Sir, as I was listening to Air Marshal Vivek Ram Chaudhary, he said that in next 3-4 years, our squadrons would be down to 36. That is our MiG-21, which is interceptor aircraft, and Mirage 2000, which is multi-role. They would be, out from the service. So Rafale, although being 4.5 generation aircraft and multi-role, so will that be able to fill that void?
Rafale, we have got only 36. We are expecting to fill the void, by the 83 Tejas, which are already, order has been placed and they will start getting inducted in the next 2-3 years, and B, by the multi-role fighter aircraft, for which the RFI has already been issued for 114 aircraft. And once we make a selection of that, then the production will start indigenously, that is within the country. But this entire process will take about 10 to 15 years. Unfortunately, we will have to live with a depleted strength of fighter aircraft in the intervening period. How we fill the void is by ensuring a higher serviceability, by ensuring a shorter turnaround time. That means I take the maximum out of that aircraft in a 24-hour period. That is the only method that we have to defend ourselves. Unfortunately, India is not a part of NATO or any other, grouping of nations militarily that we would expect that some other country will come to our assistance or give us fighters or give us, aircraft and pilots to wage wars. That is unlikely to happen because of the way we are as a democracy and strategic autonomy or whatever reasons you may say. But we have to live with this and battle this out.
Good morning, sir. My question is, the HAL in last Air India show announced the Combat Air Teaming System program, CATS program, which includes teaming up of manned and unmanned systems. So will that be a viable option for future in order to solve the issue of depleting air assets?
Yeah, so this is a new concept which has come into being, that is called MUMT, that is Manned Unmanned Team. And we are looking at swarm drones. That means drones in large quantities, saturating an area for a short period of time and all. So this concept is being studied, but no order has been placed by the Indian Air Force so far of drones in this large thing. But it's a field which can, I wouldn't say this will be able to fill the void of depleting fighter assets, because you cannot compare the two. But yes, it is an option that we could consider in the short term. But unfortunately, the domestic industry for producing these drones also hasn't matured to a stage where it will be able to meet the demand of the nation.
I think that will be enough. We have had enough questions, and Anil has been very, very kind to share his time. I will ask just one question, which is not so much relevant to you all educated students, and that is, Anil, we joined NDA in 1979, and we were doing the front rows together. And now we have our own coastmate who is heading the Air Force, and probably our coastmate will be heading the Army also. What are your views in this entire, the life, how it has gone since January 79 today, and how do you look ahead?
I think it has been a life well lived. We've had our share of opportunities, challenges, excitement, and everything, and I have no regrets whatsoever. And I'm extremely, I think we should be very proud that our postmate has become the chief of the Air Force today at a very challenging time. I think if you read the article by Uday Bhaskar, which has come out in Indian Express just 2 days back, he sums it up as to what are the challenges that this man is going to face. And the true mettle of any person comes out only when he is faced with the challenges. So from our part, I think we should wish him all the best and Godspeed. And we wish well for the country. And it has been great associating with you and interacting with your students as well. And I must thank you for the opportunity, Nehru.
It has been very kind of you, Anil, and our association started in 79. We were having Caymans almost adjacent, almost.
Yeah.
Since 1979, for the 3 years we had in India, it was a interesting time we had, and then it was a pleasure that we got in touch again. When I started this concept of New Frills Academy, Noopur, your daughter was my first student.
Yeah.
It was great that you reposed faith in your old buddy.
Yes.
So things have been going on well. It's great to be interacting with you, with your family, and thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your experiences and knowledge with our students. I'm sure it would be beneficial for them and it would energize them to join the Air Force. Any last tips you have for the budding Air Force aspirants?
The only thing I can tell them is that be sincere, be true to your own self, and be dedicated. And don't worry about anything else. Just do what your conscience or your inner self tells you, and you will find that you will not have any regrets or any problems in life. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anil. Thanks a lot. The last words, I'm sure, will stay with them. Thank you very much, Anil, on behalf of No Frills Academy and all our students for sparing your time and sharing your experiences and answering the questions with total enthusiasm. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Anil.
Thank you. Thank you, Nehru. My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Maitri. Thank you, Nehru. Thank you.